I got a message from one of my co-owners of the company that said, essentially, what have you done? You've caused this storm, this controversy. I'm like, what's he talking about? I opened up Twitter and I tried to scroll to the top, and there were 10,000 plus comments. And I was like, yeah, this is not my usual, I post something and I get a couple of comments. I knew something was different here.
John, thanks for coming out.
Thank you for having me, Lila.
So I saw you first on Twitter, the fateful day of Twitter, and I think we should just start there.
Sure.
Which was now, well, you'll probably remember the exact date, a year ago.
September 4th,
September 4th, 2021. Tell everyone what happened on that day and how it all started with a simple tweet.
On that day, I was seeing a lot of activity on Twitter with a lot of other game developers talking about the Texas heartbeat law that the Supreme Court had upheld. And all of the conversation was about those other high-profile game developers being angry at the Supreme Court for what they had done. And I was personally very happy about what they had done. I thought it was a great decision to protect the life of the unborn. So I felt that it was important to in that moment, being pro-life, to just lend my voice and say, we don't all have the same thought. Everyone in the games industry doesn't have the same beliefs. And if I speak up, maybe there's other people out there, because I know there are, like me, that will also speak up and say, hey, I'm also pro-life. And I think saving the lives of children in Texas is a good idea.
So do people in your office, I mean, you're the owner, one of the owners of your company, did anyone even know you had tweeted this?
The people in the marketing department said they had seen the tweet and they were keeping an eye on it.
Was that like a threatening? I mean, how did they say? Just like, hey, we saw your tweet, we respect your views.
It wasn't that so much as it was, we're monitoring it. We're going to see if, nothing super negative, nothing positive, just, this might rile some people. So we're going to keep an eye on it. And then a couple of days later, it exploded. And it was the #2 trending thing on Twitter, right below the U.S. pulls out of Afghanistan. And then you've got John Gibson is pro-life is the #2 trending thing on Twitter. And then the games media started to pick up on it. I was on an airplane coming back from a video game convention in Seattle. And I got a message from one of my co-owners of the company that said, essentially, what have you done? You've caused this storm, this controversy. I'm like, what's he talking about? And I connected to the Wi-Fi on the plane, and I opened up Twitter, and I'm used to scrolling to the top of the list and seeing, who's been commenting on my posts. And I tried to scroll to the top, and there were 10,000 plus comments. What has happened here? And I was like, yeah, this is not my usual, I post something and I get a couple of comments. I knew something was different here.
So let's start, and there's so much that happened in the aftermath of that moment when it all blew up for you, and in a way blew up so much more than just on Twitter.
Yes.
But before we get there, the backstory here. So John, you were the owner of one of the largest independent game studios in the world.
Yes.
TripWire. How did that happen? How did you end up being in that position and start even in the world of video games?
Well, I had been a professional musician when I was younger, and had started recording bands and doing audio. I started doing audio for some independent games, and eventually started programming some independent games, and connected with a mod team, which is a team that makes an amateur video game for free. They do it for fun. And it was for a game called Red Orchestra. And a group of us made this independent game, and there was a company called Epic Games, later got very famous for Gears of War and Fortnite. And they wanted a competition. They did a competition to see who made the best independent amateur game for one of their games. It was called Unreal Tournament. Long story short, this contest lasted a year and a half, and over 1,000 teams from all over the world entered. The grand prize was $50,000 and a license to use their software technology to release your game commercially, because without that license, you couldn't sell your game. And that license was worth $1 million. They called it the $1 million Make Something Unreal contest. Long story short, we won that contest, me and my partners on this amateur game development project. So from there, we started the company. And we're like, yay, we're so excited. We've achieved this dream of being able to take something that we used to do for fun, for free, just as a hobby, and turn it into a career.
And these were friends that you just had met, you'd known for a while. So these are basically your co-owners of
Yes.
eventually what would be TripWire.
Correct. And 4 of us got together and started TripWire as a company. And we struggled a lot in the early years. We were young, we were inexperienced, we were making mistakes, but we were doing what we loved. And over the years, in those early days, at times, I would have to do some crazy things to get the company off the ground, because none of us were independently wealthy or anything. I had to borrow money from my mother-in-law's retirement fund.
She let you.
She let me. She had a lot of faith in us. She was really great. And sometimes to make payroll, I would have to take out loans later on when I started to get some things against my house and my cars and all of my property, just to make payroll. It was really challenging and difficult. But once again, we were doing what we loved. And then eventually we put out a game in 2009 called Killing Floor. And for a game that we had just made on a shoestring budget, it came out and it sold 6 million copies. And it
Wow.
changed our world. We went from being starving artists to successful game developers. And I was just really fortunate to work with a bunch of really talented people and just have the opportunity to lead them into a lot of success. And we grew to be one of the most successful independent game developers and publishers in the world.
And there were 4 of you guys, it sounds like.
Correct.
And you were not just co-owners in TripWire, but it sounds like you'd been through a tremendous amount of stress and the ups and downs of a startup. I mean, that probably bonded you guys.
Absolutely. We were close friends. We had gone through so much together. It wasn't war, but it was almost
like
that kind
the
of
Killing
bonding.
Floor.
Yes,
War in a video game.
the bonding that war buddies get, because we had gone through so many trials and ups and downs and almost going out of business, and the highs, the lows, the challenges. Yeah, we were good friends.
So and all along this time, you are a pro-life Christian.
Yes.
Have you always been pro-life?
Yes, pretty much my whole life. Since as long as I can remember, I was kind of a pro-life activist from the time I was a teenager. When I was playing in a Christian band, I would talk about it a lot. Many of our songs touched on the topic. It was important to me, and some of that stemmed from my faith. It also came from being the son of a woman that had been adopted. My mother was placed up for adoption by a 15-year-old girl in the 1950s who had gotten pregnant with her. And growing up my whole life, just hearing my mother talk about how so thankful she was that 15-year-old girl hadn't aborted her, and that I wouldn't be there, that she wouldn't be there if she hadn't made that choice. I wouldn't be there, and now my children wouldn't be here. And that impacted me a lot. Flowing out of that care was this desire to care for the unborn.
Well, it sounds like, if your grandmother had not chosen life at 15, your mom wouldn't be here, you wouldn't be here, your daughters wouldn't be here. Yeah. So it's personal to you.
Yeah, and my mother was very young when she had us. She was 15 when she had my older sister. She was 18 when she had me. And we had a very challenging life. One of the things that I hear so often, and I've heard since I started talking about this recently, that people say that they just want to prevent people from having a bad life. So that's why we should have abortion, because people are poor, people are in difficult circumstances. And I was one of those people in difficult circumstances. We were very poor. We lived on government assistance. I grew up in a very difficult, very, very difficult situation. I was held hostage at gunpoint by a family member at one point. I had my grandfather murdered when I was a teenager by a drug addict. I was beaten up. I was, it was...
As a kid?
As a teenager. And, as an adult, I've gone to counseling for those things. And I've had an older counselor tell me, you have the most traumatic childhood I've ever seen. And this is someone that was 70 years old and has been doing it for 40 years. But despite all those things, I'm happy to be alive. I'm happy to have been able to grow up, live a life, get married, have children, co-found a company with some friends, make millions of people across the world happy playing our games and enjoying what we do, and see my daughters grow. And all of that after coming out of just some of the most terrible circumstances that you can imagine.
Was your mother, did she have something to say when all this went down?
Yes, she was very worried about me. Because as you can imagine, all of us growing up very poor, she was so proud of what I had done. She was so proud of that came from nothing and was able to do this company. And my mother was also disabled from the time I was a teenager. It was also one of the reasons why we were so poor. So as she had gotten older, I was taking care of her. I gave her a house and a car and helped take care of her. And she was very worried that this was going to destroy my livelihood. Like, what's going to happen to me? And unfortunately, she passed away this year before she even saw the results, saw that I was going to be okay.
I'm so sorry.
Thank you.
Sounds like an incredible person.
Yeah.
I've raised you, and a single mom raised you, and must have been incredibly proud of everything you've accomplished.
Yes.
So being pro-life to you wasn't just something that you felt personally, but it influenced the way that you ran your company.
As a pro-life CEO, as a Christian, one of the things I was really proud of that we did, for example, is I had 3 C-level executives that reported to me, and 2 of them were women. One that I promoted into a role and one that I had recruited. And I didn't promote or hire them just because they were women. They were smart, strong, capable, and great at what they did. But I was proud of that diversity in our leadership.
Is that unusual for the video game industry?
There are not a lot of women in the games industry, especially in leadership positions. So it is fairly unusual. And we also cared about the employees. For example, we had someone that came to us. It was one of the first times we had someone, actually I think it was the first time we had someone get pregnant. And she came to us and said, your maternity leave is not great. And I think we should increase it. And so we came up with a solution like, okay, let's double it.
Wow.
Because we want to make sure that you're well cared for and you feel like, anybody that was a woman in TripWire could feel like they could have their career and still be a mother and still be successful. We even put a room for nursing in our office so that women that were nursing could take a break and do what they needed to do. It flowed out in a lot of other ways. The company had gotten very successful over time, and as a company owners, you start very poor, and then the company starts doing better, and you start to earn more money, so you're buying some things, and you're very happy. And I realized, we're not really sharing. We're not sharing the success with the other people that are working really hard to make what we're doing successful. So we decided to do a profit sharing where we took 10% of the company's profits and divided them up amongst the employees, which is really uncommon. In the games industry, it's very anti-family. We called it turn and burn. They want to get people in, get as much productivity out of them as they can, burn them out, and bring in a new crop of people. And being young and not having a lot of money, having to come up with the insurance was very difficult. And I thought, let's take care of our people. Let's make this a place where people can make it their home for life. Let them have a whole career here. And another way that we did that was, anyone that's familiar with the games industry has probably heard this term crunch. It's a concept where in the games industry, it's sort of this sometimes unspoken, sometimes spoken, that you must work massive overtime without overtime pay to deliver games on deadlines. And 60, 80 hours a week is not uncommon. And we implemented policy like, we're not going to do that.
Wow.
We want people to have work-life balance. We want people to enjoy their lives outside of work.
And it's such a true point that the pro-human, pro-family policies in a workplace ultimately are long-term better for the company. And it sounds like you were very profitable, so it was working.
Yes, and we had grown the value of the company in just 6 or 7 years, about 20x,
Wow.
which was unheard of. We had every single game we ever released had a positive ROI, which is also very, very unheard of. We were doing well. And like any creative industry, there's going to be friction between people. There's going to be competing ideas. Certainly, we would have disagreements at times.
And how did your faith influence that kind of leadership?
It was absolutely the cornerstone of my life. But I will also share that I've had a faith journey, if you will. Certainly in the early days of the company, I wasn't as strong in my faith. I was actually pretty harsh. And I've sometimes described myself as the George Patton of video game studio leaders. I was just not very emotionally intelligent or caring. But as I embraced my faith more over the 17 years of the company, it made me want to be more caring. It made me want to be more empathetic and lead by example and be a servant leader, not just someone, as I would say in the company, not just someone throwing lightning bolts down from Mount Olympus. And I think that transformed the company in many ways. As a matter of fact, at one point early on, I had someone I worked with that I was having a lot of friction with. And I actually asked him, why are we having friction? Am I an evil boss? And she actually said to me, yes, you're the evil boss that's ruining my life. And it made me self-reflect and say, wow, I need to change. And that desire to change, that desire to grow and get better as a person comes from my faith. And later on, as I changed, she later came to me and would say she really enjoyed working with me. And I said, okay, well, I want to bring some of the training that I went through. I had a background in faith-based training on emotional intelligence. I said, I want to bring some of that into our leadership. And there was resistance initially, but I said, you remember how I used to be? This is what helped me change. And she said, we need to do that. We need to do that, because if this is what made you change, we need to bring that to our leadership.
I mean, it's pretty incredible that you would have an employee, you would invite an employee to tell you, am I an evil boss? They say yes. You say, okay, I'm going to be better, as opposed to someone who's on an ego trip or something who says, okay, you're fired, or whatever it is. I mean, that just shows a kind of leadership that, I mean, from the stories I hear of friends in corporate America, it's rare. It's really rare.
It's not normal.
And it was your faith and your pro-life conviction that was guiding you there. So when you, in the lead up to this moment, and I want to get into the context here, because some folks listening will be familiar with this, and many won't. Right. So Texas passes the heartbeat ban, and thousands of lives are saved really within weeks, because it cuts the abortion rate in Texas in half. So lives are being saved. Children are being born. There's actually a New York Times article about twins that are born in Texas, beautiful baby twins, because they weren't killed by abortion, because abortion was illegal by the time the mom found out she was pregnant. And the mom's talking about how she's happy that she has these babies. I mean, it's really amazing, right?
Yes.
So you're watching this happening, and you're not in Texas. Where are you from?
Georgia.
You're in Georgia, but you're watching this happening. And what were you feeling and thinking as you were seeing this unfold in Texas?
Well, first, to give you some context about Georgia, there was a similar law passed in Georgia by our governor, Brian Kemp, and our legislature was real similar to the Texas law. And I had seen that get held up by the courts. So when I first saw it about the Texas law, I was just very happy, because it was one of the first positive legal movements I had seen in pro-life in years. I thought it was a really big step. And I had hoped that it would also lead to the heartbeat law being able to be implemented in Georgia as well.
So as a pro-life Georgian, your law gets held up, the lives are not being saved, children are being killed, and then in Texas, the law gets upheld by the Supreme Court, and you're just so excited because you're hoping that will happen in Georgia.
Yes, I'm just ecstatic that this positive movement had happened for pro-life, and that it might lead to saving the lives of so many more babies and children in my state and maybe across the nation. It was this, just up until the overturning of Roe, was just the most exciting moment I had had as someone that cared about pro-life, that I could remember.
And your family's pro-life, your kids?
Oh, absolutely.
Your wife, tell me a little bit about them and why they're passionate.
So, my wife, she is, I would say, one of the things I jokingly say is, I think she was born being the most empathetic person I know. And I think people that are very empathetic tend to be drawn to the pro-life cause because they realize it's not just, it's very important to save the lives of babies, but they also realize that the lives of the women that have the abortions are so negatively impacted by having the abortion. The media like to portray it as they make a problem go away, but that's just not the case. The statistics show that women, after they have an abortion, they deal with so much sorrow and grief, especially in the cases of, a young woman is raped. Rape is a terrible, violent, criminal act. And the feeling is that this, having an abortion will just make that pain go away. But unfortunately, the damage is already done, and more emotional damage is done from the abortion. So these are the kind of things that my wife and I discuss, and she would share if she were sitting here. When I made the stand for life that I did on Twitter and got all of that backlash, it was sort of a bonding moment for us.
So many in the pro-life movement were so excited by your tweet because there were a smorgasbord of all of these pro-abortion bosses, these corporate America leaders, all of these celebrity figures, elites, politicians, who were talking about abortion as if it's this great, beautiful thing when it's this horrific violence, and who were acting as if every woman in America wanted abortion, when half of American women don't want it. There's millions of us. And so, I was celebrating with tears in my eyes, as many of us were, that Texas was standing up for children, for their lives, and to see you tweet about it when everyone else, I'm not an expert on the gaming industry, but my impression of it is the people that speak, they're pro-abortion. And talk to me a little more about what went into that tweet, because it wasn't just that you were excited that Texas was banning abortion and protecting lives. I think you were also looking at the radio silence from other leaders in your industry, or if they were saying anything, what was going on?
Well, I did see either silence or anger against the Texas law from my peers in the games industry. I wanted to speak up because I felt that there had to be more people like me out there. I thought, if I just put my voice out there, if I just say, you're not alone, I believe this, I'm a pro-life game developer, maybe it will encourage others to stand up. And maybe it will help dispel this false narrative that everybody is pro-choice, when in reality they're not. It depends on the polls you look at, but at most it's 50-50. It was interesting when the tweet went live and sort of the heat got on. I got so many messages from people in the industry saying, "Thank you, I agree with you," private messages. I had a couple of public messages, mostly private. But one of the things that was actually kind of sad, I had a high-up person at one of the largest video game companies in the world sent me a message as a VP, said, "I agree with you, I'm pro-life, but don't tell anybody because I don't want to get canceled."
So the tweet went viral. At first they were just sort of monitoring, like you said, the marketing team was monitoring, but then what happened next?
So it absolutely blew up. It started with, there was a journalist who is kind of I would say a liberal activist journalist, whose goal appears to be to try to cancel people that he doesn't agree with their politics. And so he starts tweeting about it, trying to spread the word. A couple of high-profile game developers see my tweet and start saying negative things about it. And it just snowballs from there. It ends up getting 12 million views, and then the gaming press picks up on it. And there was a website, and I will name them because I think people need to know just how I believe terrible and wrong this website is. It's called Kotaku. And they ran a story that says, Killing Floor boss, i.e. Killing Floor, the game that our company made, TripWire's boss, me, thinks women shouldn't have basic human rights. And that was the headline.
It's garbage, yeah.
And it was absolute garbage. And some of the gaming press were more fair, but most of the coverage was negative. And then a day later, the mainstream press picked up on it. And then it was just everywhere. It was almost every major news organization in the Western world. And it seemed that most of the coverage was negative. Not all mainstream press was negative. Some of it was supportive, but most of it was negative. And it just seemed that they were stupefied that a tech company CEO would come out and say they were pro-life. They just couldn't believe it. It's just not done. You don't do that. You're not allowed.
Well, that's the thing, and they had to punish you for it, and they did punish you for it, and I want to hear about that. But the context here is half of America is pro-life. In fact, there's a poll that says that of the Americans, 46% supported the heartbeat law. 46% of Americans supported the heartbeat law in Texas, only 43% opposed. And despite that, if you are in corporate America, they will punish you if you dare to speak. And they wanted to make you the example. And they meaning all the pro-abort reporters, editors, and then other CEOs who weaponize politics and want to make people pay in the workplace for it.
Yes.
So what happened next after it goes viral? You get started lambasted by the press. I mean, I'd hope these co-owners of yours that have been in the trenches with you and built this company with you and know you inside and out. I mean, these are friends. Mm-hmm. How did they respond?
It started out, I felt like it started out very good. We had some very good in the sense that how they were treating me. And we had some discussions about what to do. And, I want to give context to this because really it's important for me. I don't want to throw anyone under the bus. This was a challenging moment for everyone. You may have heard me use the term before, social terrorism. And this was social terrorism. This was an attack that was attempting to use fear, intimidation, social pressure to force a company to fire someone or get rid of someone because the social terrorists disagree with their views. And in those moments, when it first happens, you don't know, you've got 10,000 angry people shouting, we're going to boycott your games. You don't know what's going to happen. So we were all scared about what the future was going to hold. So in that moment, I volunteered to step down temporarily as the CEO to get the heat off the company. And the idea was that I would help lead the company from behind the scenes. I would stay with the company, stay employed, and help the company behind the scenes while things cooled down, and then I would come back, potentially at some point later on. That's how it started. As the mainstream media coverage picked up, as the social pressure on the employees picked up, and that's one thing I want to highlight here. People very much look at something like Twitter or other social media and that part of cancel culture or social terrorism, and they think that's it. But the more damaging thing that happened was people that worked in the studio, their friends were attacking them. Their friends were attacking them saying, how can you work for this terrible man that doesn't think women should have basic human rights?
So these are like leftist pro-abortion friends.
Yes.
And I think what's such an important point here in this is that when moments like these happen, there are millions of pro-life Americans, but they don't go and attack people who disagree with them. But if you are a pro-life American and you have a pro-abortion friend, that pro-abortion friend is more likely to attack you or even try to get you, unemployed, it sounds like. Literally attack your livelihood. It's this weaponization that's coming from the left and the pro-abortion side, where if you're pro-life, you're not, hoarding on Twitter attacking someone. The attacks come from the pro-abortion side. Why do you think that is?
I think that it's been normalized in society.
But it's seeming like the normalization is coming from one side.
Yes. It's been normalized by the left side of the media, and a lot of the owners and people that run social media companies that have been on the left have normalized attacking people on the other side and trying to cause them to lose their livelihoods to achieve their goals. And I think it's just a vile practice that shouldn't be done.
So they kept the pressure up, though, because it sounds like you stepped aside as CEO, still going to basically be in leadership, but just for now, just as the heat is flaring, we're going to take a little break, so kind of let the heat subside. But it sounds like it didn't subside.
Well, the heat from the outside did subside in a week or two, but that social pressure on the employees of how dare you work with this person, and then some of the employees get scared that they're going to get canceled, because this is one of the issues right now with what I call the social terrorism, is that there are social benefits to being on that side. There are professional benefits to being on that side, to being on the left, to being pro-choice. And
you'll get an award. Basically, if you're pro-choice, then you're welcome, in Hollywood. You're welcome in the editorial board of the New York Times, as long as you have, the talent. But you have to fit a certain philosophy or ideology, and that has to be a pro-abortion one by default.
But likewise, there are social detriments to being pro-life and on the right and being conservative. There are professional detriments to being on the right and being conservative. So I would describe what happened in the company. I think most people they're center right, they're center left. There's like this bell curve, most people are in the middle. But there are the people on the edges that are absolutely the true believers, wanting to do social terrorism attacks and come after your livelihood. And within our company, I think it was represented about like that. A small number of employees were very, very adamant about they'll never work with me again. It wasn't everybody.
For one tweet.
For one tweet.
And these are employees that probably already knew you were a Christian and pro-life. It sounds like you weren't hiding that you were kind of a more conservative guy, or at least more pro-life, if you don't like that. More Christian by nature. But it was the fact that you dared to tweet about it.
Yeah,
and that the heat came.
The heat came. There were some people in the middle of the bell curve, they just didn't want the heat. Makes sense. But there were some that were, even after the heat was gone, like, we will never agree to work with this person again. And that's where the friction between me and the other owners came in and created an untenable situation. A situation that the only resolution was to sell the whole company and for me to have to leave.
And that's what ended up happening.
And that's what ended up happening.
So of 100 employees, how many were saying we're going to quit unless John's gone?
I talked to many people after this happened. I think it was between 5 and 15.
Okay. It's just incredible that 5 to 15% of a company can control literally the CEO. And that's social terrorism.
Absolutely.
And not just control the CEO and his livelihood, but this is not just one company. This is happening and can happen all over the country if people allow it to. If everyone else is silent. I think that's part of the key here, is who's going to speak. If the only people speaking are the people that are pro-abortion and out to get other people, and the pro-life people are not speaking up for each other, we're just going to see more wins from the pro-abortion side in trying to destroy people's livelihoods and reputations. So you were ultimately forced to sell the company, and you were the biggest owner of the 4 co-owners, if I'm understanding. And did anyone else agree with you in the company?
There was anyone at all. There were many people that reached out to me and said that they agreed, and they said that.
At least 5?
Oh yeah, way more than 5. At least 10.
Okay, so if it's 5 to 15 that are basically outing you, and at least 10 in
That
support,
directly reached out to me.
but they were silent.
Yeah.
What do you make of that, John?
I had someone very high in the company say to me, they agreed with me that they're pro-life, that they think cancel culture is terrible, but they didn't want to be the next person to be canceled. They were scared.
They were terrorized.
Absolutely. They were terrified.
So the company's sold now, and you're finally speaking out about this.
Yes.
What do you think is next for you?
Well, first, this has been the most brutal and difficult time I've ever experienced. I spent my whole life training and crafting my skills to make video games, and that's just been taken out at the knees. On top of that, I lost 6 very close family members over the past year. I mentioned earlier my mother, she was 66 years old, and I lost my little sister, who was 44, and my aunts, and it goes on from there. So it's just been a very difficult time. I'm still hurting, I'm still getting over it. I'm not defeated, and I will move on, and I will do something else. But I'm just gonna take some time to prayerfully consider what's next. I'm getting a lot of encouragement to not give up and go back and make video games. I still have the skill set, and I might do that. I've thought about starting another kind of company to do something just completely different, something I would be passionate about. And also, my wife and I, we absolutely love to do charity work, to do missions work. We've been doing a lot of it over the last 5 years anyway. Maybe we can do that full time and ramp it up to another level. But we're just going to take some time to consider what's next.
What's your advice to other people who are listening right now and they're afraid of getting terrorized and canceled, but they're pro-life and they also want to be brave?
Well, I would encourage people that the only way this is going to change is if more people stand up. They need to know, whether it's the entertainment industry or corporate America or wherever you're at, they need to know they're not alone. They need to know that there are at least as many of us that are pro-life as there are that are not, to stand up. And then also, if you're in a job and you're getting harassed or getting treated negatively because of your pro-life position or being a conservative, report it to HR. As somebody who has worked in corporate America, HR departments are very, very keen on not exposing themselves legally. And they know they have to document any complaint that you make. So let them know early and often if you're getting harassed by your coworkers, if you're getting harassed by someone in management, if you feel like you're being discriminated against for your beliefs, let the HR department know. And then speak out on social media. You don't have to, all you have to do is say, I'm also pro-life. You don't have to tie it to any specific moment in time, whether it's Roe or the Texas Heartbeat Law or whatever. Just say I'm pro-life. And that's all you need to say, and others will see that they're not alone. And then eventually, it will become normal that it is a conversation between people. I very much think that in the past, when our country has gotten this divided, those things have been solved by wars. And I think this time, let's not solve it with a war. Let's solve it with conversation. The solution is not to shut down conversation on politics or religion or abortion. The solution is to talk about it and look at what the real facts are and look at how abortion really impacts women and minorities and the poor negatively, not positively. Let's have that conversation and resolve it through discussion, civil discussion.
And we see when people actually learn about abortion, facts about the humanity of the baby, what the abortion procedure actually does, the harm abortion does to women, many people become at least less pro-abortion, if not become pro-life, yes, because they see this is a life, and life is worth it. One last question for you, John. Would you do it again? Would you, if you could go back in time, would you still speak out on behalf of life?
Yes, I would. And that's difficult to say because it did cause a lot of hurt to me and my family. It caused a lot of hurt to people, to my co-owners, to people I work with that I care about. But I believe that there are moments in history where we have to take a stand for the greater good of humanity and the greater good of the world. And yes, I suffered because of it, but if one life is saved, it was worth it.
Well, thank you, John, for inspiring many other people, and I think your example will inspire others to stand up and speak out. At the end of the day, that's the only way we're going to make the change that needs to be made.
Thank you, Lila. I appreciate you talking to me.